Good evening, everyone. Thank you to our Sustainability Committee members and our special guests. We have Mayor Klein with us, our Village Administrator, Chris Bradbury, Roots and Shoots Club President, Wanda Kim, our Trustee Liaison, Stephanie Fisher, and the rest of our committee members. And thank you for the public who watching this later for our February 2023 Sustainability Committee meeting. I will first turn over to Mayor Klein for comments on our leaf blower legislation.
Just say hello. I didn't really have any comments. I'd say thank you for everything that you're doing regarding the leaf blower legislation and everything else. Those of you who served with me on the committee in the past know how the leaf blower ban is something that the leaf blower legislation, I should say, is something that we've been working on for a very long time and something that was near and dear to my heart when I was on the Sustainability Committee. And so I'm very glad to see that it's moving forward. I know that it was actually one of Paul's last acts as mayor to refer that to the possibility of having legislation to the Sustainability Committee. And I know it's been a lot of work for a lot of people, just, meeting with the Landscaper Association and with others to try and move this forward. So I think, what you've come up with, we did set a public hearing at our last meeting, at our last board meeting, and we'll be having that public hearing on February 28th. For reasons obvious to, or at least us on the board, we didn't want to have the public hearing where we knew a lot of people would be attending and at our next meeting, because that happens to be on the 14th. And I think all of us on the board are married, so we'd like to stay so. And so, being at a meeting till 11 p.m. potentially on Valentine's Day probably wouldn't have been the best idea. So we've moved it to the 28th, and we'll have a public hearing and hopefully be passing the legislation at that point. So I know what you've drafted is very similar to what already exists in some of the surrounding communities, and so that should be more palatable to the landscapers, because they're probably working in multiple municipalities. I'd say this is like I said before, this is something that I've wanted for a long time, so I'm glad that we're getting there. And yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have or hear what the discussion is. I apologize that I'm gonna have to leave in about 7 minutes or so to get to another meeting.
So I have something to say, which is so the legislation as it stands, the draft, at least the current draft, has a requirement for electric leaf blowers from March through September, and then gas blowers can be used from September through March, the rest of the year. There's been feedback about wanting to let landscapers, homeowners, whomever, use electric leaf blowers during the March to September timeframe because of walkways, and it's been requested for walkways, pool decks and regular decks. So I understand the reasons for this. I have concerns about it because I feel like it makes this legislation really light. I think it's going to be harder to enforce because it's hard for people to necessarily tell the difference between gas blowers and electric blowers. I don't think that landscapers are going to be really disciplined about restricting their blowing to just a walkway or this or that. And when I looked back at the original draft of the 2019 legislation, which was moving immediately to all electric or phasing in all electric, and as time has gone on and there have been multiple discussions, we had multiple feedback from landscapers, feedback from the police chief about this, and like other groups. I understood, okay, so we'll do we got to we'll do gas during the fall months because there are a lot of leaves and this and that. And so I feel like there's been this slippery slope to the point where this legislation isn't really going to move the needle in terms of the factors that we want to improve, which is the noise issues, the fact that when you're blowing topsoil, you're taking away the fertile soil, and then more chemicals are needed to fertilize the land. The fact that, it takes the leaves away that our pollinators use to nest over the winter. And I'll just, it's like that's really my point. I'll just have an anecdote that I feel like I hear landscapers go longer and longer in the fall winter season, like, really up until Christmas. There were just blowers everywhere, and you look around, you're like, what are you even blowing? And it's just a lot of mindless blowing. And I feel like unless we have really concrete and specific legislation, that we're not going to really achieve what this legislation intends to achieve. That's it.
Thank you, Ashley. No, I totally agree. And I know one of the concerns of the police chief was the enforcement of having the phone versus like an email. I know he brought up before maybe having like an email form, and he had said no, that he'd rather have them call, but I don't know if there's some sort of in between that we can think of a better way to enforce this that doesn't put a toll or burden on the department. So maybe we can think up something as well for that.
I mean, another thing we
Can I
talked
make
about
one
is,
suggestion for the
adding-
committee? Sorry.
I was just going to say, like, if we, somehow we got rid of the phased in approach for electric, my feeling also, and I had written an email to the committee, I don't think you were on it, Jason or Chris, but that, if landscapers can use electric from March to September, where I understand there's less blowing, they've got the equipment. I mean, they're going one step in the right direction. And then we should at least, again, to make this put a little more put some more chops back on this thing, is have a phased approach where, then we will eventually be all electric in 2 years or something, because we've talked about, like, once you pass legislation, you're not going to revisit it immediately. It's going to be standing for a while. So we should have some, phasing back in. I just feel like it's gotten whittled down too far, and I'd rather add some chops back into it. No, sorry, Chris. Thank you for letting me speak.
Oh, yeah. No, I
And
just.
actually, Chris, I'm going to jump in for a second
Sure.
because I have to run in a minute. But I thank you for this conversation, and I look forward to hearing some of what comes out of this. So thank you very much, and I apologize that I'm.
That's okay. And with you on here, I want to compliment Chris Rivera, because he has been like herding cats to get us all together and leading us through all these conversations. And he's just gotten up to speed really quickly, and he's been a real just saint for this whole thing. So I wanted you to hear that.
Thank you. Great to hear. And thank you for the conversation.
Yeah.
I look forward to hearing what comes of it. And
Thanks.
everyone have a good evening.
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks.
Bye, sorry.
One suggestion that I have, I'm not a policymaker. Mine's kind of got to weigh out some of the issues for you guys to discuss. One of the things that I think the legislation's missing that might be helpful even for the, when the board's reviewing it or the public, a lot of times the legislations have a statement of purpose, like what is the purpose? And I think if there's even a brief conversation about that, certainly noise and environment are two important issues, and it's going to be easy to say kind of it's both. But maybe if I don't know if there's one that outweighs the other, it might be helpful to have a statement of purpose. If the goal is to go all electric in 2 years, or is this is a stepping stone towards that? Is it more the noise issue? Is it more the environmental issues? Because then the board can have a discussion about the benefits of the reducing noise or helping the environment.
And the 2019 original version had it, so we can just paste it back in. We've got it. It's very comprehensive and concise.
Do you remember what the kind of lead was for it?
Yeah, I have it up here. It was there's a paragraph on air quality, one on noise pollution, one on climate change, one on nutrient and habitat retention. Those were the 4 sections.
It was definitely the environment, and considering that we are the sustainability committee, as a committee, that's our main goal. That the noise is an issue too, but the electric blowers are not completely silent, which is why Ashley makes a very good point that if someone's walking by they would really have to look to see that it's a gas blower. And, you know, the environmental part is definitely, I think, I don't know how everyone else on the committee feels, but that I think is our main purpose.
Yeah, and both are mentioned in the 2019 content. So I think there's, I agree with you that we're the sustainability committee, and there's room for both. I mean, there's a sustainability element of the noise and the impact that has on all living things.
Sure. Including in the environment.
Absolutely. Yep. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, birds and yeah, they're all affected by the noise as well. I think we've also seen the outcry from the community specifically about the noise. So, want to address their concerns as well, but it does definitely have an environmental impact also. So yeah, well, to both, it's multifaceted, which is good, so.
So two questions I guess I would throw out just for discussion. One is I would leave the discretion to the police about whether they issue the violations to the property owner or the landscaper, because I think it could be different depending on the situation. So if the property owner is telling the landscaper, I don't care, go use your blowers and get it off, then the property owner probably should be getting the violation. If there's a landscaper that seems to be throughout the community and always the violator, maybe it should be the landscaper. So that kind of discretion maybe for the police would be helpful. I think it's better to leave that open to either one and let the police handle that based on the situations. That's one suggestion. And the one part of the concern I think that at least the police and the staff had was if you don't allow the electric blowers, what do you think the residents that have contractors will do? Do you think, because we're questioning whether they'll sweep. So do you think they're just going to go out and use their blowers and hopefully not get caught until we go after it? Because we're also concerned, like, if it's, eventually if they're just blowing it, or if it just ends up in the street, that's going to go down the storm drains eventually when it rains, so just thinking it out, what do you guys think the homeowners will do if we ban it altogether, like during the summer season?
I could just speak as someone who lives in the Arbors as part of a homeowner association. I think if our Arbors trustees thought there was a possibility that they were going to get fined by the community, that there would be a lot of pressure on our landscapers to not do that. And we have a lot of tattletales in our community. Yes, Stephanie knows. So it would not happen.
So what do you think? They would just leave it? They would just leave it in the driveways in the street, you think? The grass clippings?
I don't know what they would do, but they would follow the law.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I did want to invite some people. I have to see if they can come to the new meeting that we have set, or the new hearing that we have set. But I plan to invite some people from the other communities that had passed similar legislation to get their input on how it has worked for them, so they can give us that insight as people that have had it for years now. So
great.
I mean, I would also rather just kind of see what happens rather than worry about it. I mean, in other communities also, the landscapers have to bag all this stuff. I mean, they can have a mower with a bag that collects it and then it doesn't spray out onto, I mean, I guess there's the hedge trimmers or whatever that they use, but I mean, I think that we're really generous with our landscapers with, the leaf pickup in the fall and all the other maintenance that like our DPW does that makes their jobs a little easier.
This is an open discussion, guys. So if anybody else wants to jump in, please do so.
I mean, I think what we have to do is just, I think we should go take the draft of the legislation, add some of the 2019 stuff back in, like, Chris suggested, that has the explanation about why we're doing this. I mean, in terms of the section about how to manage the violations, how do we get then the input from the police about how that's going to happen.
And I will say where I live, we don't really have a sidewalk on my street, but the one in front, I see the landscapers blowing the debris. They're not blowing, they're blowing it in the drains, would drain anyway. So they're not necessarily keeping that out of the storm drain. They're actually putting it towards it just to like get it out of the way. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not actually trying to keep it away from our waterways at all. Like that's not their goal. It's just to make it look decent in whatever way they can. So they're basically like putting it towards those drains. So I don't really know if it stops that from happening.
Yeah, you're right. It's the same either way.
Because their goal is aesthetics, you know, and they're thinking, okay, if I move this off of the sidewalk, I can blow it towards the drain over here. I can blow it into the road, which is what I have video of them doing this, like all the time. And so that's what they do. They're not trying to like keep it out of, you know, any certain section. They're just trying to make it look better, you know, on their client's property. So.
Do the trustees, this question is for Stephanie and maybe for Chris too. Are the trustees concerned about how the community is going to react to this? Yeah, you think there's going to be a lot of pushback from homeowners or their land?
I think, let's see, I mean, I think if there is the possibility of a fine to a homeowner, I think people are going to be annoyed. They're already complaining about the taxes and all the other things. I think they're going to be annoyed with the potential fine situation to them. I think that if we are, you know, if the landscapers have to go electric and that's what they're doing and that's the onus is on them, I don't think I really feel like people won't necessarily care either way. But if the potential fine can come to them, I think that's going to be a problem.
And I do think as far as the fine goes, it makes more sense to me that it falls on the landscapers than because I don't think residents are really watching most of the time what the landscapers are doing. And these landscapers that operate within Rye Brook, they operate all over Westchester County within other places like Rye, Mamaroneck, all these other places that already have these rules. So they should know what's going on, you know, and they shouldn't be that, you know, they should know how to adhere to these rules.
I honestly think that if you really want change, it's got to go to the homeowners because they're the ones that want it cleared. I think a lot of homeowners, my concern is that a lot of homeowners are going to say, I don't care. I want the patios, you know, clear of grass because I don't want to drag it back into the house, or I don't want my driveway to have grass. I think that they're going to do it. And I think if they want the client's business, that's what they're going to do. I think it's going to be at the direction of the homeowner, and they don't want to lose that homeowner. I think if the homeowner gets the fine, they're going to tell them, you got to stop doing it. Or here, I didn't tell you to do that. They're going to pass the fine on to the landscaper, you know. And now, don't get me wrong. If there's a particular landscaper that keeps being the culprit, then you issue the fine to the landscaper.
They're also going to lose business.
Yeah.
Because who's going to want a landscaper who costs them money?
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like fining the homeowners is going to be a big problem.
It is a problem, but that's how it's going to stop.
Right.
That's how you're going to stop doing it.
Debbie, do you want to make a comment?
I do. Two things. One, in all of our discussions, the point is not to make this punitive. We don't want to be a community where people are being fined for every little thing that they do when there's all these infractions that they could possibly do. The intent is really to change people's behavior to better our environment and our health and the quality of life in our community. So the intent is not to punish people. The intent is to change behavior so that we can all live healthier and do better by the environment. That's number one. I think when we talked about landscapers versus homeowners, interesting for me listening here, because we actually, believe it or not, have homeowners in Rye Brook who do their own landscaping. Not everybody has a gardener. Mm-hmm. I know that we think of ourselves as affluent, but there are plenty of residents that do their own yard work. And so I think that the fines do have to apply to the resident as well as the landscaper. I guess we have to think about it in a of, if the landscaper is using it, who's actually getting the fine. But it seems to me that it would be the property that would be fined, not necessarily the landscaper who's working on that property. I think it's up to the residents to understand what the rules are in their community. I just,
Could it be who's operating equipment?
I look at it like if you're doing work in your house without a permit, we're going to issue the fine to the homeowner, not the person
Correct.
doing the work. However, if we have a particular contractor that keeps getting caught, we'll go to that contractor and give that contractor a fine too.
Okay.
And I think that's reasonable. I think that's a reasonable because I do think that the homeowners that are hiring, the landscapers, obviously the landscapers need to know it. But again, we can't exclude residents because there are plenty of people that do their own yard work and they need to know and follow the rules as well. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up is
there's really two issues here. It's one, as Stephanie brought up, some people are going to resent the fact that they could be fined. But two, what Chris brought up is that people like a certain look in their yard. I actually think that's going to be the harder issue to address than the money. That if people keep wanting, we had that with the fertilizer and the pesticides and the things that people were putting on their lawns. If people are insisting on using the leaf blowers to make perfect decks, I'm in school mode, perfect lawns, everything to be perfect, that's going to be a really, really hard thing to address. So I don't know.
I agree. Yeah. And
I
I
don't
think
know the answer to that one.
because in theory, if the landscaper, if you have a landscaper or a homeowner and you can't use the electric blowers and that landscapers, I don't foresee that they're going to go out with brooms. So that means the homeowner's going to have, in either case, the homeowner's going to have, if they want that off their driveways, either by picking it up or sweeping it back onto the grass, they're going to have to do that.
Yes, Debbie had a second point. Debbie, did you want to make a second point?
I was just going to say that I think it's incumbent upon all of us collectively to educate our residents, because it really is beneficial to our community. And I think that there is this shift toward understanding that, perhaps the way we thought our lawns should look is not the healthiest for our lawns and for our environment. And so I think that that's where this educational and kind of cultural shift needs to come in. And I also wouldn't be so quick to say that nobody will use a broom. I mean, like, seriously.
No, I think the burden is going to be on the homeowner to do it. I think people use a broom. I use a broom on mine. I do my own grass, but I
think a landscaper could take out the broom, and most of our properties are not huge. Most of our driveways are not that long. They can be careful as they're cutting the grass and be more conscious of what they're doing so that they don't spray it all over the pathways and the decks and the driveways, if they know that they have to then brush it off to the side afterwards. So, I really think these are all solvable things. I think the bigger issue is communicating the benefits of the legislation and why we're doing it and why we feel it's important. Communicating that we're not the only community that has legislated this. Perhaps that, this is phase one, but in general, that we're all going in that direction of healthier yards, and giving people, the opportunity to start to learn how maybe what they've assumed in the past isn't the best and the only way to do it.
That's a good point too, Debbie. I do my lawn and I have a mulching mower, and I always go in a certain pattern because I know it's going to blow to the inside when the lawnmower will automatically. So I make sure to make my life easier for sweeping afterwards that I always go on the outside. I go in a way so it's going to push to the inside. So yeah, it's a different pattern. You get used to it.
I also think, like Debbie said, I think the focus shouldn't be punitive damages. So, my concern is residents being like, "Oh, you're fining me? Are you kidding me?" Is maybe we have like 3 warnings or whatever it is, and that way they will learn by the time they probably get their first warning. Like, oh, I have to make changes here. I didn't know.
Absolutely. And we also talked about a phase-in period where the fines wouldn't start day one. So,
Right.
maybe if it's not even year one, maybe the first year, it's all warnings, whether that's time frame or a period of months or based on the number of warnings a homeowner gets, whatever it is. I don't want to live in a community where I feel like I stepped outside of my home and I'm going to be fined for something. I really, really would be upset, honestly, as a homeowner and as a resident here. I don't think that's our intent. Our intent is to ultimately change behavior. And so absolutely there should be, the first year, we're not going to fine anybody. We're going to get everybody used to it. The first 3 months, we're not going to, whatever that time period is that the legislature decides on and that the trustees decide.
And I think that will also make things easier for the police if they know that that's not something they're going to have on their plate.
It would be the easiest way to go about it for our police would be a period of warnings, and then because it's harder, because remember, it's different officers on rotation. They'd have to go to the computer and find out if they've had any warnings in the past, because they don't want to issue a ticket, because now once they've issued a ticket, it's a problem. So yeah, if you just have a period of time, whatever the board decides that is appropriate, that's the easiest way. It's going to be a month, 2 months, the first year, whatever you decide, there will issue warnings. And that's absolutely easy for us to do. If that's the way you want to go, we can certainly do it that way.
One concern I had with the legislation was the exemptions for, it seemed like a lot of property owners who own large amounts of property, religious organizations and schools. What is the explanation for that the community is going to be providing? So I feel like there will be some questions about that.
Well, I'll just speak for it tends to be the larger properties where you have larger equipment. We have most of us have very few staff, whether it be the school or the municipality. So we use larger equipment to get in and out. We also use a lot in emergencies. And the other part of it is it's much easier for us to be nimble and just go, like, we intend to look at more, we're already examining electric. So all it takes for us to do is just the board to ultimately say, you can't use it anymore, or you can't use it next year. And we won't do it. So it's a lot easier to be able to manage that part of it for us. We can stop it or continue it or look for alternatives. And that's right now we're looking for alternatives to phase in. We have a very small public works and park staff. We have 3 parks employees that has to maintain the field. So it's just very difficult for us to be able to maintain the properties without having some of that equipment on those larger parcels.
Can I talk again? Sorry, but we had discussed this also as a phased-in approach that perhaps the trustees should consider, so that to ultimately get rid of these things, because the same arguments that the village is making about the staffing and changing over equipment potentially if we were to go all to electric is the same argument that residents and landscapers may have as well. Everybody has those constraints, whether it's staffing or financial constraints on them. So I also think that the trustees could consider some type of phased in approach where over time, and perhaps like a nursing home would always be exempt just because of the nature of that type of community. So there may be some properties that we would want to have exemptions forever, but I do think it'd be beneficial to have some type of phased-in approach for the other exemptions.
Mm-hmm. Our clear goal is to use less leaf blowers when residents are not allowed to use it, and our other clear goal is we intend to go electric in a phase-in period.
But that may not be written in legislation, so people may not know that. If anybody in the public would open the legislation and read it, they wouldn't necessarily know the intent.
Mm-hmm.
But we've discussed this at our board meetings too, in conversation that Chris and I have had. And the other thing I just want to add in terms of like our own personal exemption, as I explained before, is that not only for our skeleton crew that we have, but again, the work portfolio that our parks as well as our highway crew have, it's just that it's a very wide expanding portfolio of tasks they have to do. So it's about getting those tasks done in the quickest and efficient way possible to move on to the next one. Because again, it's not just, of course, maintaining we have 5 different parks and maintaining the roads and all the other responsibilities they have. And again, it's small crew, but it's a much larger portfolio than what the landscapers have to work with.
Like we do is we have to attack certain properties with more, like our public works crews will help out on parks sometimes. Our parks crews are also doing leaf collection and street maintenance. So like we'll as Greg just said, we're just in so many different areas. We kind of have to get in, hit it, and get out. But I think the better thing for us is we want to use more electric to get rid of the gas over time, and that's what we want. We want to start that now. That's why we've been looking at other municipalities that are buying that equipment. And the highway and Public Works knows it's coming. We've
And
told them
Chris,
it's
I'm
coming.
not sure if you have the answer for this, but I think last meeting we talked about how I don't believe we have schools listed in the exemption, but I don't believe we have any jurisdiction actually over what the schools use. So they can probably be taken off of that list anyways.
Yeah, well, we do have a few private schools, but yeah, unless they're covered. But the only thing we have is like the private schools, like you know, the Rid Street, some of the school properties.
But for the most part, the schools are their own sort of thing. So we wouldn't necessarily be able to tell them one way or the other.
Yeah, we can enforce, just so you guys know, we can enforce Crawford Park or the schools.
The nursery school on Ridge Street can be enforced, but the public schools cannot.
Correct.
Interesting.
And Crawford, of course, belongs to
I
the
mean,
town,
yeah.
but Crawford's a moot point because Crawford has already switched all over to electric. Although for them,
Yeah.
as I said, I mean, it's a lot easier for them to do so because the town of Rye only has jurisdiction over 2 parks. And then I'll take into considerations that we have to.
Yeah, but there, Greg, though, like say it was it included municipalities, we couldn't make Crawford Park do it.
Yeah.
Like for leaf blowers.
But we could certainly advocate to the Rye town
Yes.
officials
Yeah.
They
to
already have,
fight.
they've transitioned all their equipment over to electric.
Yeah, they already did it last year, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
And same thing with
But-
Rye Town Park as well. Both
Do they
parks.
use, but I'm saying is if they use leaf blowers and we ban municipalities, we couldn't enforce it. That's all.
It's under the jurisdiction of the town of Rye.
Even if it was electric.
Right. Is there ever like a concern about without using leaf blowers, whether it's electric or gas, for sidewalks, that there might be some liability that, you know, if property owners are not blowing them out, that if someone slips on, you know, a sidewalk, that someone could be liable for something like that? I mean, has that been a concern at all for the trustees or for this group?
That's an interesting question.
I
It's
would
not-
say
I can tell you from a liability, it's not our liability unless we're notified of it and then we don't do anything about it. So the way sidewalk issues occur is it's the responsibility of the adjoining homeowner to maintain the sidewalk. If we get notified of a defect of the sidewalk or lack of maintenance, that in order to pass that liability again back to the homeowner, we need to notify the homeowner of the defect.
So in other words,
Why
yes, it could be an issue for homeowners.
For
Just being
homeowners,
placed
yeah.
with snow, if they don't clear the snow and somebody
Mhm.
slips, it could be an issue for homeowners. So yes, it's a concern.
But we also aren't the first. I mean, this would be based off of other places, you know, Rise, and so we aren't the first people to have this language written up, and it seems to be working okay for them, I would say.
It would be interesting to hear, though, in other places like in Rye, if that's been an issue. I didn't even think about that. That if there are leaves on the sidewalk and someone slips, like if there's ice and snow, I think people already know you're responsible for clearing it. But do they also know they're responsible for moving slippery leaves?
Yeah, I mean, that was another concern, just because with my property, I do have a rather long sidewalk in addition to my driveways. So, you know, if someone was walking around, it could be a concern.
But if we're thinking just in terms of leaves, the time that we do allow leaf blowers is during that leaf fall period. So as far as slipping on leaves, you would most likely, during the time of heavy leaf fall, you would be able to still use a leaf blower to clear the leaves. So it'd be more so using the leaf blower for like clippings, dirt, things like that, that we wouldn't be allowing versus the leaves.
And possibly some of these other places will say, and that would make me feel better, it hasn't been a problem for that reason.
And there is the exception for, emergency situations, storms and that type of thing. So, if we're ever in the situation where there really is debris, then the village has the opportunity to make exceptions.
Right. And that makes sense.
Yeah, so ideally, we'd be able to get hopefully a few people from the different communities that have had similar laws in effect for a few years to give their testimony to how it's been working for them. Hopefully I can gather those people, so we'll see. But I haven't heard anything horrible happening, but they have similar to where they do allow leaf blowers during those heavy leaf fall periods. So I don't think that people are necessarily having that problem. But I'm not sure if, during other seasons, it seems like people are more using them, like we said, for grass and things along those lines, which aren't necessarily fall hazards unless you're like doing, I guess, huge amounts of grass on the sidewalk. But I personally haven't seen that myself. But so I'll try to see if I can find some people to give us some insight on that.
And I think Larchmont might also be a good example in that they did a lot of community outreach in terms of presentations on low impact landscaping and things like that, in terms of educating people as to the real intent of the law. Because to be honest, we're banning May through September, which is not like heavy leaf season, peak leaf season. So this is really about just getting people to change their behavior, understanding what the issues are. So I think these communities that have done a lot of like education and outreach would be great to leverage their insights on. I did have a question about, I saw the note in Greg's email that said that there was no appetite to like revisit the law once we issue it. So to that point, do we need to make more clear what the next phase looks like at all when we submit this, or is there any plans to say like what our long-term, whether it's 1 year or 2 year, is for possibly banning gas outright?
I'm in favor of that. I'm in favor of that. And I have to, and first of all, it was Shiho you just mentioned, and I was looking at the legislation that the ban is just May through September, and I thought it was March. So
Yeah.
that like triggered me because I was like, why did I keep thinking March? It's 2 months shorter than I thought. This is even weaker than I thought.
It's really, yeah, to me, it's not that strong.
Yeah.
So
So I totally agree. I think there needs to be like additional plans in this legislation for phasing to electric. It just has to.
Yeah, I feel like that would be a really good addition to this legislation if we can agree on what we want that to look like. I mean, now we have a little bit of a time crunch coming up.
Well, not really, because you don't have a time crunch, because I think if the Sustainability Committee would like to make sure that that's addressed by now, then I would make that recommendation to the board. They wouldn't put it you wouldn't normally put that in the legislation, but what you would do in the approval process, you would build it into the resolution approving the legislation. Like, this is the first step of a goal of putting this in, whatever, 2 years, whatever that phase in is, that you would put it in the resolution adopting the legislation, because that's speaking to the intent of the board.
Okay.
That was one of the questions we had really for the trustees was, is that something? We didn't want a situation where we take this legislation, we pass this legislation, and then nobody looks at it for the next 5 years or 10 years. So that's a great way to handle it, so that people kind of understand that there will be more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then that's a good way to do it. You put in the resolution that speaks to the intent, and then it makes it clear that this is like phase 1 of the next phase.
But can't we nail down phase 2 in this legislation also, or you're saying just like give a coming attractions and then do it later, or we actually put it in here? What are you saying, Chris?
So I just had to unmute.
It's okay.
I would, if it was me, I would suggest you put the purpose in the legislation. So in other words, you're going to put that right up front, and that you
Sure.
said you had that from the prior version. I would make a recommendation to the board that we recommend this be, the first phase towards a 2-year implementation. This is the first step. And then if the board agrees, I would have that built into the resolution approving the legislation. So
Got
it
it.
wouldn't be in the actual legislation because that really is not the place for it. What you're doing is the resolution that gives direction, and that would be both adopting the law and stating the policy that we want to put this in place in 2 years with the next step.
Okay,
That would be my recommendation.
that sounds good.
And would you be comfortable having the intent also reduce those exemptions in phases, subsequent phases, to have that written into the resolution as well? Or it would just stay generic?
The board could do either one. I don't know where the board sits on it, so that's something that the board would have to discuss. As long as they're in agreement with what's recommended, then you could build as much specific. To me, the more specific you are, the better it is for staff. But I can't speak for the policy issue.
Well, can we start with our one trustee? I don't mean to put Stephanie you on the spot, but just see what.
No, I mean, I'm okay with putting in there, first year, just kind of like warnings, and then, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, you guys craft it the way you want. And I'm happy to weigh in on it, but I like the idea of giving people like a year and with educating, the community at the same time. So I'm okay with that.
I think that's the easier part, Stephanie. I think the sustainability committee is recommending more steps. So in other words, that this is the first step towards going all electric, for instance, not having a ban during this period and then having it be all electric in a phase-in period, something like that, for all the types of equipment. If I'm wrong, please correct me, guys, but I think they want to make sure that this is the first step of several steps towards a more, sustainable environment.
Right. Okay. I mean, I agree with that. I think it's good. And I think that should be written in to the legislation.
I mean, I think the tricky thing, and we've discussed this again for since 2019, but there's the gas versus electric, and then there's the blow versus no blow. And so it's, the electric is more challenging because then new equipment has to be purchased and this and that. But ultimately, when we list at the beginning the rationale for doing this, things like blowing away the topsoil and the pollinators, no blowing is better even than electric. So it's this dance that we do. And I think having a phase-in makes the dance a little harder, because it's which do you do first? For example, the current draft that we have says no blowing May to September. When we add an electric, I don't want to suddenly say, well, now you could use electric May to September. That seems then you're going in the other direction. So, and I think it's even hard to discuss it. Someone almost has to kind of craft out some different iterations, and then there has to be a conversation giving feedback on those iterations, because it's very nuanced.
I think that though there will be electric allowed during those earlier months for other types of equipment, right? We're talking about going all electric for gas, for lawn, grass cutting and trimming and things like that, right? So I think that there is, in terms of the bigger picture, I thought we were talking about electric requirements for other.
Oh yeah. Oh, so you're talking about other types of equipment.
Yeah, I thought.
Yeah,
you were talking about the first steps
yeah,
right
that.
now.
I didn't even get to the point of talking about those types of equipment. I'm even saying just with blowing and not blowing, there's still this dance between, do you make people buy electric, or do you just tell them not to blow at all? And if you're going to have a phase-in for that, it's already a little perplexing, at least to my brain, about how you do that, because then we could say, okay, well, the legislation we have year one is don't blow May through September. You can blow September till whatever. And then what do we say in year two? Then you don't blow it all May to September, but then in September you have to start using electric. Like
I
that.
thought that's what we were saying.
You can do, that is
That
a
would-
possibility.
that would
That
be
could be built into
great.
legislation. As long as the board agrees, then that could be built into the legislation itself.
I'm cool with that. That's we don't have that in the draft right now, Robin. That's all.
Oh,
I think,
Yeah.
it,
Right, and I
yeah,
think the
it would
things that Ashley
be
had
way
brought
too
up-
confusing any other way.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things Ashley had brought up in the past, and maybe others as well, since I'm new to the committee, was if the ultimate goal is to ban leaf blowers entirely, we don't want a phased-in approach where we're converting people from gas to electric, and then later on telling them, sorry, you can't use any, because now people have gone out and purchased electric equipment only to find out a year or two later that they're also banned.
You're
And that's
talking
where
about the
it gets
May
what is
to September.
I'm talking
time?
about any time of year. There's two potentially conflicting ultimate goals. One is to move everybody from gas to electric, just leaf blowers, forget about other equipment. For leaf blowers only, one goal would be let's move everybody from gas to electric because it's better for the environment and all the reasons that we've discussed.
Right.
And the other would be let's move everybody, let's ban leaf blowers. And depending on what that ultimate goal is, you know, if your ultimate goal is to ban leaf blowers entirely, you don't want to have a phased-in approach where people convert from gas to electric, because then you're going to be telling them, okay, now you converted to electric. Oh, by the way, now you can't use anything. So that's where the nuance that I think Ashley was trying to get at comes in. If the ultimate goal is no leaf blowing ever, and finding
In
other
the
ways to
summer.
mulch in place. What's that?
In the
I'm talking about
summer.
ultimate. I'm talking about long-term ultimate. If our ultimate goal is to have people mulch in place and not use a leaf blower ever, which I've heard in our prior meetings, if that ultimate longer term is, I want people to switch over to electric, only to be told later on they can't use it at all. If our ultimate goal is to switch from gas to electric and potentially also still have some periods of time during the year where we don't use any leaf blowers at all, and then the rest of the time when you're permitted to use it, it's only electric, that would have a different type of phased-in approach. And I think that's where it's helpful for us to understand really what we want long-term. And that's potentially a reason why, if we want to pass something now, we don't delve into the long-term specific phases, but we just get something started and then continue to discuss the things going forward. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
I agree with you.
We don't want to have people, like Debbie says, purchasing new equipment for us to then tell them like 2 years later, well, now you can't use any, throw it all in the trash, because that's obviously against what, you know, our whole purpose is. So yeah, it would be, if we're going to do that, then we do need to figure out what our end goal is so that we're not confusing the public. So that's something that we haven't discussed yet. We have to figure out before we make a final decision, but keeping that in mind before we decide to advise people to buy certain things.
And I just, oh, I'm sorry. I just want to say, I feel like the board might be a little resistant to that idea. You know, maybe not Jason, but I feel like some of the other people might be a little resistant to a full out ban, especially in the fall when.
Yeah, I think the arbors will go ballistic.
Yeah, it could even become a dangerous situation, you know, with, like we said. So, and I just think that might be a little problematic, and I'm not sure how the board would feel about that.
Well, I am hoping to get Portchester to attend the meeting, because they have actually started to not use blowers on their own personal properties. They've started leaf mulching everything, and they used to actually collect a huge amount of leaves. Like, I'm talking, they had like mountains worth of them, and they've had a huge success with doing leaf mulching only. So maybe they can kind of attest to the success of that and how inexpensive it is. But of course, we also have, you know, the general public that we have to educate on these issues. And I do think that's more of a very long-term sort of goal. and getting people to understand that, you don't necessarily have to get rid of all of your leaves. Yes, you can clear them off of your driveways and sidewalks, but they don't necessarily have to be put in the bags, or they don't have to be blown. They can be used as mulch. They can be mulched into the ground. They can be put into flower beds, and be beneficial to your garden in that way. But I think that's a very long-term goal. I think some places are further ahead than we are with that. But I don't know how long that would take. So maybe that's scary right now for people for us to say that, like, oh, in 5 years, no leaf blowers, that might be something that's scary to them because they don't understand the concept of that yet. Versus in 5 years, we were at a totally different point with this 5 years ago ourselves, and now we're thinking about banning leaf blowers. So I feel like maybe 5 years from now, people will be more open to it. It will be more acceptable. But maybe this is like more of a long-term thing that we don't actually put into writing at this point.
Bridget, I'm picturing that like kind of like that spreadsheet that we have had for years of the other towns and their dates and their timing and when they banned it and when it's allowed. Has anybody fully banned it that you can remember?
Is Bedford maybe? Let me. Yeah. I believe Bedford does one of the strictest bans. Hold on.
Oh, Greg has it. I've seen it so many times. I just can't picture, I can't remember.
We can certainly figure that out for you. And
because I just didn't know. I know a lot of towns have restrictions, but I didn't know if anyone had actually fully banned them yet. Like, I don't remember us even talking about that, to be honest with you.
A lot of them fully banned. There's a few that fully banned the gas in particular, but they
right. But I'm saying, I mean, leaf blowers. Has any town fully banned leaf blowers?
I believe, and I need to confirm this. I believe Bedford has a 10-year plan where they do have it written that they will eventually fully ban them, but it's in like 10 years. I need to confirm that, but I do believe that is their policy. And I believe Rye has something similar where they plan to fully ban them in like, the distant future. But it's not anywhere,
I
close.
know in the I know just a few years ago, a couple of years ago, there was a big campaign that Love Them and Leave Them campaign. And I remember there was some communities. I thought that some did ban them after doing that campaign, but I have to go back and look as well.
I know most are doing what we're planning, which is a phased-in approach. That's kind of how they have approached it. And most of them are fairly new in that most places have implemented some sort of ban within the last year or two. So if they do have a phased-in approach, it hasn't taken place yet past like the initial legislation. So it's still kind of developing.
From what I remember from that spreadsheet is a lot of municipalities had banned it during certain months, mostly the summer months. And then they were phasing in electric blowers for the rest of the year. But I really don't recall anybody banning them completely.
Yeah, that's
right. So on Bedford, that was when we were discussing this at the very beginning, Stephanie, that's absolutely where I'm remembering we were. And I don't know, Chris, if there was a resolution, if we'd have to even be thinking that far in advance that we're headed in 10 years to a total banning of leaf blowers. I think that would be very hard. And I hope no one would be at that meeting when a resolution like that was read. I just think that would be very tough. And I just wouldn't want it to completely kibosh the summer banning of leaf blowers and people's embracing the importance of switching to electric, like don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm afraid people will go so crazy with that.
I mean, Stephanie, when we did originally discuss it, that was the conversation that I remember having.
And maybe
I
we
mean,
see how well received this is before we propose something. So,
Well, and if you're gonna do it, maybe the first step, I mean, you certainly could do, if there was a very clear policy to do it in a decade or whatever number of years, there's nothing wrong with putting down a resolution because it speaks to the policy intent. But the other part of that is if you want to take a softer approach, that would be to put this in place and then do an educational campaign on things like the Healthy Yards program or the Love 'em and Leave 'em program, encouraging more, things that will help people's yards actually become healthier. And, that's another way to go about it. There's nothing wrong with that, either of the approaches. The question is, what's best for Rye Brook?
So just a note that on Bedford's site, and everybody wants to go to their website, it's quite information about transitioning to leaf blowers. They had a phased-in approach for the months when gas could be used, and they talk about how to landscape without using gas. Somewhere highlighted, it says, although there's no restriction on the use of electric leaf blowers, it's recommended that you switch to more eco-friendly lawn practices. As rebates and incentives become available, we will distribute those into the new regulation. And it has all kinds of tips and everything. So it's really quite comprehensive with all of the information about it. And they have, again, like in 2022, they banned gas blowers from April 1st to May 15th, October 1st to December 15th. And then in 2023, they're banned except for April 1st through April 30th and October 15th to December 15th. And in 2024, they basically give 2 weeks in the spring, April 15th to April 30th, and then to November 21st. They're really tightening the time in 3 years. Gas blowers can be used. So that phased it in.
yeah. And I know maybe we can look more at this. And I know Bedford has the 2030 plan, which is where they plan to be like carbon neutral or something. There's something along those lines. They have like a very ambitious plan for their community. They also have a huge sustainability committee with a lot of resources. I know they're doing like buybacks of gas equipment where they're giving people like $100 if they sell them their gas equipment towards like an electric leaf blower or whatever, which is really amazing. I don't know if they do that with their own funds or if they got like state funding or something for that program, but I know they advertise that to the community. So they definitely give a lot of incentives to the community to go green. But yeah, they definitely are cutting back. And I believe I heard something about them, and it sounds like from their timeline that they are trying to eliminate leaf blowers as much as possible, if it's only for a few weeks here and there. So, but I do agree with Robin, though. It seems like it would be a little bit contentious for us to put this in the legislation, because people would definitely come out and be like, what? Like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Because just to get them around this idea, this general idea, is going to be hard enough without us trying to add in like, oh, well, you're never going to get to use your leaf blower at all, so.
I mean, two things. One, in the chat, I put the link to this spreadsheet that I've sent you guys like 100 times that says that it's from the Healthy Yards people, and it seems to be updated because they have some things that are supposed to happen in 2023 and 2024, so they seem to keep updating it. So that's a resource. The second thing I have to say is that people always complain when there's change, and then the change happens, and then like a year or two later, they've like forgotten how it used to be. So I just feel like a lot of our concern and discussion is how are people going to react and how's this or that and whatever. And there's always going to be complaining and there's going to be this or that. But that's what change is. And I'm like happy to like weather the storm. And I just know that once there's a new normal, that's just going to be the new normal. Like that we have bulk trash picked up every Friday. I just thought like that's my dig of like, why do we do that? But anyway, people get used to stuff and they will get used to this and it'll be awesome.
Yeah, and maybe there's a way we can approach it that makes it a little bit more palatable, that still gets what we want done.
Yeah,
I did notice Larchmont it became the first community to ban gas-powered leaf blowers for the entire year, effective this year.
Hmm.
So they just did it this year. It becomes effective January 1st of last year, 22.
well,
So they banned it entirely.
they did, and they had a big problem because they didn't do enough of a phase in. I mean, they got a lot of pushback. So I mean, they didn't do. I mean, I happened to was going to Larchmont once a week for an appointment, and like I would drive right after they passed this, and it was just like gas blowers galore everywhere. I was like, I thought they had this ban. Okay, clearly it's not really working, but yeah, I think, you know, again, people will figure out change, and I think that like, yeah, there's education and they have to understand and this and that, but I think like clarity, just clarity is like really critical to some people just tell me what I have to do, okay, and they just need to know, like,
I still think this, and I agree with you, and I wish it were,
mhm.
but I think this is a little different than things like the straws and the plastic bags, because it's the
Mhm.
way people's homes look.
Yeah,
And
I'm not
it's
comparing it to
very
straws and
visible.
plastic bags.
And
I'm just
I know
comparing it
things
to
like
life.
the White Building, the 900 building right
Mhm.
here. I've lived here 28 years and it hasn't happened, and in large part because of my community and hiring lawyers and things like that. So I'd hate to think that embarrassing, but I hate to think that that we would go to a point where people wouldn't see a bigger picture because we would go too far too fast.
Yeah.
That's all. And I just would want, I mean, the
I
little
think that's
things like
where,
don't use your leaf blower from May to September. What's a big deal? You know, that there are things that we can do that, you know, we can convince people your home's going to look great. It's not going to matter. And when you have to transition your equipment, transition to electric. That's all going to be better. So I just would hate to see this go down in flames because of people coming out and it being too too much. We're telling people what to do.
Yeah, well, that's why I said it's clarity, and having worked in PR and done like research about for different things, people are motivated by different like criteria. For example, for some, it's everybody else is doing it. That's a huge one. And we are like the main thing we have to also say is like, look at all these communities. Rye Brook, almost said Blind Brook because it really is more of a Blind Brook than a Rye Brook thing, but like, we don't like to look like we're behind or, not, the only ones that don't have something or aren't doing anything. And I think like that's a big appeal to the mindset of our community, maybe even more than the health. Like the noise is a big, issue with our community. They don't like the noise. So, lead with the things that we know are going to have all the huge number of reasons we know our community and what is going to motivate them.
Yes. And the education part is critical, and making people think this is going to be better. You're going to like it better.
And I think our education plan that we had talked about was actually getting like a mailer out to every single person or every single property would be really beneficial in spreading the word about the benefits of this, how a garden can look, if you mulch your leaves, and how it is beneficial, the noise, the environment, your grass, blah, 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 all that extra stuff that we can then explain, because right now, we don't have the audience with them. So if we can get them mailers and just explain the benefits of this, then hopefully people would be on our side and they would want to tell their neighbors like, hey, did you see this? Like, this is great. Let's, let's support this. So Anything else that we wanted to add to it potentially? I know we had said add amendments to the draft for phases, and that we would for next steps do warnings, and potentially going full electric during the months. Is there anything else that we wanted to potentially note as part of that, or?
We were gonna plunk in the stuff from the 2019.
Oh,
I don't know if you have that.
Purpose, yeah, the purpose.
I don't know. As a next step, Bridget, I'm willing to work on this with you if you want to do that.
Yeah, that would be
Another
great.
draft. Okay.
And I did want to talk.
Also,
oh, go ahead, Debbie.
I was gonna say, I emailed the Bedford site. We don't necessarily have to recreate everything. Also, like they have all the reasons listed of official. So just pick up stuff from something else. And I think going forward too, having information on our website, which I'm assuming will not be a problem on the Rye Brook site, about benefits, right, of moving in this direction would be helpful. Educational component.
Yeah, definitely. Some sort of some addition to our website, social media. Maybe we can do some videos or something along those lines. I think that'd be great. And Bedford has been really nice, and they've shared resources with us before for like our seed exchanges. They've given us like a lot of free materials that they've paid for. Because like I said, I think they have a really big budget, so they do give us some things for free. So I'm sure they'd be willing to donate supplies or let us use their wording for different things if we ask them. So.
And I would like to think that the high school group, Lana, could get involved in pushing for it, because we can't control what Rye Brook does, but you could put on some pressure there.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering like what the school, like if there's anything that the school is doing. Like I feel like it'd be hard to stop using leaf blowers altogether because it's such a large property.
Think about it when you're in your class on the first floor, and inevitably, I know as soon as I would open up my mouth, the leaf blower would start right outside. It impacts your education. It impacts your air quality. So I would think you have a great opportunity to push back on the use of leaf blowers during certain times, and certainly in times of year, absolutely to parallel what the rest of Rye Brook would be doing, because the school would be exempt from that.
Oh, okay, I see. No, I think we could definitely like advocate for that in the school, and at least like let people know that this is going on, kind of push for it within the school.
Exactly.
And I know Port Chester, like I mentioned, they do exclusively do leaf mulching now on all of their park properties and everything. So I think that's a good solution to these larger properties. It's to get them those leaf mulching blades, which they told me are not expensive because they have a very limited budget with their maintenance crew. And they said that it's been a great thing for them and that they've only seen positive aspects to it. And that's what they exclusively use now, is they just do leaf mulching on their properties instead of blowing and collecting things. So it seems to be working for them. So maybe if we can get Luis, hopefully from Port Chester, to come and attest to what they've been doing, hopefully that will be something that could inspire maybe Rye Brook in the future.
That could be in our video.
Yes, exactly.
But I think that the students can be a powerful, this is Rye Brook, I know, but the Rye Brook school system has a tremendous amount of political clout. And these are the children that are going to go home and encourage their parents to follow the rule for their future. So whether we film students doing this, whether they start mulching on school property and doing things like that, I think that would be a tremendous amount of education that we could leverage.
Yeah, and you're right. If the noise is disruptive to people in their homes trying to work from their home offices, I'm sure we've all experienced it's disruptive at school too when you're trying to learn.
It absolutely is.
Mhm.
So I'm going to summarize where we are from a legislation standpoint. So the board has the draft legislation. They set a public hearing for February 28th. The Sustainability Committee is going to recommend some changes to that, including the items that Bridget mentioned before. And just so be aware that, you know, we're going to invite residents, the public, let people know that this is out there. There's a public hearing if you want to come speak on it. And just so you guys know procedurally, if there's any substantial changes to the current local law, the board couldn't act on it that night. They'd have to put it forth, make the changes, and then continue the hearing for another night. So just realize if they modify the law in any substantial way, then other than some minor, like, you know, corrections, then that just they have to extend the public hearing before they vote on it. Just want to kind of walk you through the process.
Chris, if the legislation stays as is, but the language is included for, you know, phased in approach later on, or that this is step one, even if we haven't clearly defined what the future steps are, that then they could vote on, correct?
And what? I'm sorry, you cut out for a second.
As they would be able to vote that night if the legislation stays as is, as it was already proposed, with the prohibition in those months of the year, and we don't go any further, but we talk about that this potentially would be phase one of additional phases without necessarily specifying what those additional phases are, that they could still vote on.
Probably, I'd have to just double check. I'd have to see the language that was put into it, but unless there was something changing, something that the public could have commented on, that's the only, if it's not specific, then it shouldn't be an issue. But if it's specific, then obviously something that would be subject to the hearing. So you can certainly raise it at the public hearing, but I would suggest you also transmit the language that you're recommending prior to the public hearing, because then our council can look at it and determine whether or not that's a substantial modification.
But when you talked previously about a resolution, is that separate?
We could put it in a resolution that night.
That's the legislation.
Yeah, the resolution is easy. That can be
That's
modified on the fly.
So that's what I meant. The resolution that talked about a phased-in approach, and that this would be step one, and then the legislation could stand as is, as the legislation that's being passed as. Okay, so the resolution is what would show the direction.
Correct.
And the ultimate goals, perhaps.
Then they could act on it.
And the legislation could stay as is.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, the resolution could be modified that night. It's just the legislation that can change.
Right. One thing I did want to ask, or to try to break this out, if we're past adding things potentially, or talking about things that we potentially want to add to the legislation, is to break up the presentation. And for a few members, I know Ashley had said she'd be willing to speak, and Robin potentially as well. I could introduce things, but if we could sort of break this up so that we could have multiple members speaking on the 28th, that would be great. I think we could divide it up into some smaller sections for everybody. I don't know if anybody else is willing to, or if you know that you'll be there on the 28th, if you're willing to speak to the board. And we could, of course, help you draft things, you know, but.
If you guys don't mind, I'm going to get off at this point. Is that all right? You guys need me?
Thank you, Chris.
You're good, Chris, but thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Debbie, are you able to speak that night? I think
I can probably, if you need me to. And we'll also try to get people to attend. So I just, after our whole discussion from everybody on the committee, do we want to keep the legislation as is and what was proposed that we just discussed, and then just handle the other things that they can move forward with this? That, because that seems, otherwise we're kind of taking a step back and we're not going to get anything done. So I just want to hear from everybody.
I listened to what the distinction was between like passing the resolution and writing some intent thing, but to be honest, I don't totally get it. Can you re-explain it to me? Sorry.
So the way I understand it, and Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong. The way I understand is that there's two things that the board can do. They can pass a resolution, and the resolution can kind of describe what it is that we're trying to do. In other words, the environment of leaf blowers and going to, be moving toward this, green, and here's our goal. We want to be a healthier environment, and it can be as general and specific, I guess, as they want. But the legislation is the legislation that's already been drafted, that we've already submitted, and that they discussed and set a public hearing for. So the issue is the public hearing was set for February 28th based on the legislation that was already introduced, that the trustees introduced at their most recent meeting. So they introduced it, they discussed it, and then they set a public hearing for it. They can then hold the public hearing and vote that night on that piece of legislation as it exists.
Yes.
If we're going to change that legislation in any way, then they've already called the public hearing on the current
I get it.
legislation.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's
They vote that tonight if it's the legislation.
Yes, if it's major modifications, then
But they can also vote on a resolution that outlines
Good to hear.
of, so that would be a separate document that they could introduce and vote on.
Okay. I guess my opinion is I don't
Stephanie,
like the
does that-
legislation as it's written now, so I would rather like not have this legislation passed because I'm scared that it's going to be passed and then we're not going to add in the things that I think need to be added in.
here's what we could start with that. At least, I know you and Bridget were going to draft some additions. Why don't we just look at the additions first and show them to Chris, and then we'll see council. Let's get their input, and then we'll take it from there. I think
And
that's
Okay.
about
And
it.
Greg, also with a public meeting, if there's substantial changes, doesn't it have to be like posted for 2 weeks before the meeting?
Yeah, so that's the thing. So it's already been, so I've already sent it to the paper. So we're in there in terms of the notice of the paper and everything. So we're good right now as it is. But as Chris stated, so the draft local law that you guys already voted to set a public hearing for on the 28th. If again, you can make some minor modifications here and there, but if there's major modifications that changes major elements of the local law, then you would have to like reset the public hearing to whatever, and I don't remember off the top of my head, to be honest, whatever the first meeting in March is going to be. Because now you have to reset it because now you're changing key tenets of the local law that kind of alter what I guess the original, best way I can describe it, with a previous local law was. But now if there are just minor modifications or if you want to just put like a narrative to it, then that could be fine. Now, again, I think that my personal view is that the best next step regarding that is just at least see what ideas there are, and in terms of put them together, and let's have Chris, as well as more importantly, let's have our legal counsel look at them to see if we're in compliance with that. Because if we are, then great, and if not, then we'll have to go to plan B, whatever plan B is.
I agree.
I thought.
And again, a resolution is an intent that shows direction.
Yes, and a resolution
And
pass a local law.
these are elements
Part of that.
of resolution, and it goes hand in hand. Here's the resolution, here's where we are going, want to go, and why we're doing it, And that basically shows the motivation and the intent of the board. And that's an official right? That's, and if it gets passed, it gets voted on and passed.
So
Legislation is a separate piece. So then you can have other pieces of legislation that would pass that are in keeping with that resolution.
yes, so the
If
resolution,
that makes sense.
anytime we pass any local law, I mean, again, a resolution is always going to part of, because it's within, or you have to have a resolution to pass or to any local law, just like you have a resolution for anything. So that's what also Chris means by that though too. You just that you have a resolution, and then maybe you can put as part of the resolution passing the local law, like outlining some of the steps that we would like to take. Now, again, like I said, I think the next, as I previously said, is to just check with council whatever ideas that you guys do have, just to see if that would be in compliance with the requirements to add that either as part of resolution, or maybe we can just throw it into local law as is. And again, I don't have the exact answer right now, as Chris said. We have to check with council, but if we get that soon, then because today is only the 2nd, then I would have time to reach out to our attorney so that she can give me her verdict on if we're in compliance or not.
I had a quick question about how it's written now with one, I think the violator will be given a warning first and then penalties thereafter. Where are those penalties listed? I wasn't sure what that linked to. It said something about 158.6 of this chapter, but I didn't know where that was located.
So that's, we have to create it. So I think also she has to we had to create, if you see in the top, it's creating, I don't remember the exact chapter section. But in terms of the penalties that it's listed to, I think that's also another chapter created, or it's referencing another part of the code. And I'll be honest, I don't remember off the top of my head, but that's what that would be.
Yeah, I don't remember what fines we agreed to.
I think they were also already with noise restrictions and construction work and that type of thing, that there's already code in Rye Brook, and I believe that's what we linked back to be consistent with the codes that are already in place.
But yeah, it was just referenced again, like what the noise code is, et cetera. And then other parts of it, again, just have to be created from scratch because we don't have any reference point in the code yet.
Okay.
But so
and did we address all of the police's the email with from the police that were all of those questions addressed?
As best we can. And again, there are certain things that, again, I'll speak to him with Chris either tomorrow or in next week. But I think for the most part, again, to the best of our ability, we addressed as much as we could. But again, there are other things to talk about. And outside of this, like between myself, Chris, and the board, as well as the police lieutenant, just kind of strategizing in terms of once this is actually passed, just to try to have a smooth implementation process on their end. But Bridget and Ashley, whenever you two can just get that over to me, then I will have legal counsel review it as soon as possible.
Definitely. Thank
But
you.
before I move on to just the other couple of quick topics that I have on the agenda for tonight, I know we have a few speakers here, but I just want to at least have a couple backups, because again, if Bridget, I know Robin and Ashley, you all volunteered, and I thank you for that. But if one of you gets sick or something happens, there's an emergency, you have to drop out. Again, I think we should have at least one or two more who are ready as backups. I know Debbie said you'll be willing to do as a backup. I think we should have at least one more backup. And again, when you speak to it, doesn't mean you can. Okay, thank you. And you don't have to have it again. If you just whack it up between the 3 or 4, whoever is going to be doing this, and you don't have one person doesn't have to say the whole thing, and it doesn't have to be hard either. Nice and easy. Okay, so I think is anything that anybody else wants to raise regarding leaf blowers before we move on? Once, going twice. Okay, good. I'll see you guys a no. So I just want to give a quick update. I know I spoke about it briefly last meeting, but I know some of our members weren't on there. I think Trustee Fisher, you had to leave a little bit earlier too. So couple outstanding grants that I've talked about in prior meetings. So the first one about Rye Park, I mentioned that unfortunately the grant that we've been in for got denied. But using the cost analysis that Bridget put together, I sent that over to the student's father from Rye Brook. He said that he may have some donors who may be able to fund it. I don't, I think actually if you want to donate. So again, donations are going to be open. One thing I will be honest, I still haven't figured out yet in terms of how, and I'll have to figure this out probably with Treasury, is in terms of how we establish a certain fund for again, provided that this project, of course, does end up happening. I'm hoping that it will. But if we see some solid funds coming through, then what the process would look like, just so everyone's aware, it's just that we're getting drafting of a plan with Bridget as well as Christine and Denowitz, who lives in Harrison, but is also an expert like on butterfly gardens and pollinator friendly plants. So she can help us put together some sort of draft plan for that revitalization, and then it will go to our DPW foreman Paul Vinci, as well as our Parks and Recreation Superintendent Robert Bertolacci for their approval. And then should that happen, then I would coordinate with them as well as the student to start initiate the phases required to undertake this project, whether it be ripping up some like the old plants that are there and make sure everything's clear, and then getting volunteers that we need to plant fresh ones. And there's some talks about me having a bench there. Again, I guess we would have to see again who in the area makes nice benches. I mean, I honestly don't know myself personally, but that's something that we could research. Just the other real quickly regarding food psychoscience. For those, so we do remember we had the speaker from Canada come to present to you guys about the FC30 and the Maestro, the two different kits that are the food composter. So again, that's almost submitted. I just am missing one thing from the food cycler science, right? Group up in Canada that I'm just waiting for, is that way I can just recircle back with the grant writer, and that way they can resubmit that. So ideally, we're hoping to get funding for about 100 units. So 50 for each model. And just speaking about it with Chris, the way that would work is that it would be first come, first serve. And we may not get 100 units, but even if we get 50 at 25 of each, it's still the same. And the way the cost breakdown is, so the grant would cover 50%. The village is obligated by the requirements of the grant to do a 25% matching fund. And then the resident, whoever chooses to get one, would have to buck out the other 25% of the cost. That way everyone has some skin in the game. And so everyone would contribute. The village can contribute a quarter resident, and half ideally for the grant. But again, I'm hoping to get that one wrapped up soon, and that goes to the New York State and DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, and they review grants on a rolling basis. So the grant writer told me right now they don't currently have funds, but maybe in a month or two they will. So I'm hoping, as I said, just to get that last bit of information I need, so we can get that submitted, and hopefully, even if we can ideally get 100, but even if we only get like 20, we're at least making some sort of progress. As I said, anyone who wants one at that point will be able to get them. And as part of it, and I'll have to ask the grant writer if we can do this with the grant. Maybe we can cover some of their training costs to come to travel from Canada to come do demos. And that's typically what they do when anytime a municipality starts with this process, is that they come at least to do a training demonstration to the community, whoever is going to win, I guess, and whoever else is interested in terms of how their products operate. Now, as I said, they are new to the United States market, and I know they just did a big expedition, you could say, to Kings County, which, if those who don't know, it's in the state of Washington, and more particularly, that's where the city of Seattle is located. Rye Brook will probably be on it. It would be one of the first municipalities in the country to really kind of do this undertaking. So we are kind of, interestingly enough, we're going to be like an experiment for them to see how it works here in America. I mean, at least from the data that I've seen in terms of the reviews they've gotten, it appears that the Canadian municipalities they work with, that it's gone very well for them. But again, we're just trying to give residents more options. And then the main, at least, arguments that we're putting forward within the grant narrative is that residents will be making less trips to the food compost site right here in our parking lot at 930 King Street, where Village Hall is. and therefore it will reduce our tonnage, and which we pay a tipping fee, so it'll reduce the cost for the village and a little less of a carbon footprint. So there's cost benefit to the village, and there's also an environmental impact that we could see from this. Now, again, it's just a pilot program, but if it's starting, and if residents want to maybe purchase some of these units in the future outside of this pilot program, then at least they have some exposure to it, and they can maybe speak to their neighbors and the residents of Rye Brook that would potentially be participating in this. So, let's say anyone has any questions regarding that.
What do you know what the cost would be to the resident once the grant and covers a portion and the village covers a portion? What's the remainder?
So that's actually interesting enough. That's the one part I'm still trying to figure out in terms of the cost, because again, it was a bit of conflicting information. So that's a great question. And I will circle back with you, Bridget, about that. But I'm just trying to figure that out with them, because they were nice enough to write up some backup information just to kind of make the grant application stronger. But on one document they showed me was one price, and then the grant narrative, they appears to be something different. So I'm just trying to confirm with them what's the exact one, just to make sure we have that narrowed down. Once I have that exact price, then whatever that price is, so let's say it would be the municipal price, because they give, will have a different price for their municipalities. Let's say municipal price for Rye Brook is $250. So whatever 25% of that would be. Now I'm just throwing a number out there again, because I'm not, that's what I'm still trying to get clarification on.
Okay.
Anybody else, any other questions? Okay. So then just the final thing is, and we started also this conversation last week, just touching up on just how do we get further our participation at our events? Because as stated, just to be totally honest, we have some events where it's just Bridget and myself, or just one or two other committee members, and we just want to try to be as fair as possible to everyone. So again, I know some of the things that we talked about maybe is before we commit to doing anything, whether it be a seat exchange or any of the events that we may be interested in doing, we try to commit at least 3 people to going. Now, I'm always going to go myself, but again, we do definitely want to have a stronger representation than just Bridget and another committee member going. So I just want to briefly again get some thoughts from you guys in terms of a couple of things here. So what events are we interested in doing? Just some conversation with Bridget before this. Again, I'm assuming we want to do seat swap again. And we did the last couple at the library, and it appears to be a very good location. And again, they're always more than happy to host us to do that event. So that's one thing we can do.
Yeah, and speaking of that one, I don't know if you want me to mention now that Port Chester Sustainability has approached us
Yes,
to say that they would like to do another seed swap on April 29th. It was either April 15th or April 29th, but they said that the 29th might be best because of weather, because they'd like to do it outside again with us. So that's an event that I believe they'll do with or without us, but they'd like to do it in conjunction with us again at the library. So I said that I would bring it up at our meeting today, and that I'd be happy to help too if they would like to do that again. So I don't know if anybody else would want to come to that, but they usually have 1 or 2 people come to help with the table, but it is usually pretty busy with residents that visit and want seeds and plants and things along those lines. So it's a nice event to go to meet residents.
It does get a lot of foot traffic because it's right. I mean, Port Chester is always packed with residents going by, but it's also a bus stop right there. It's a big sidewalk, and with the post office on the end. Again, a lot of residential properties at a church right across the street, and then further establishments down the road. So there's always going to be a lot of foot traffic. Even during the fall, when it was a little bit colder, it wasn't as busy as the spring, but it was still relatively busy compared to what we've had. So again, definitely it would be nice if we can at least have a couple other of our members. Again, I'm definitely going to be there myself, but a couple of members volunteer to go.
I can send out
I
an
agree
email.
with I was just gonna say, I agree with the process that as we commit to things, we should make sure that we have enough coverage and that it shouldn't fall to one person. So I agree with 100% as we're going through the year and planning what we're going to be doing. I happen to have a conflict already on April 29th, so I am not volunteering for the seat exchange. But if it ends up being on a different day, then I can reevaluate.
And especially for like the planting events and stuff where we're planting like 200 plants. And so that's where we definitely need more manpower because of course it takes a lot longer if we only have 1 or 2 people planting like so many things. This one can technically happen with just a couple people. So it'll be okay even if it is only 2 or 3 people there. But especially for like the trash pickup and the planting events, like doing the butterfly garden, that's a huge concern for me. That's a really, really big project. And if we don't have the commitment of quite a few people to help with it, it's just going to be too much for like a few people to take on, just because of how big it is and how much, manpower that needs. So
I'll commit to the butterfly right now. So at least we have one so far. But what might be helpful, Greg, if we can kind of sketch out for the year the different events to attend and then push that, at least tentative, and push that list to everybody on the committee and ask them to sign up for 2
With dates.
Yeah,
with dates. That's ideal. For me, it's hard to say, okay, in 2 weeks, we're going to do this because I'm kind of booked.
yeah,
So,
that's
but
a
to
great
know
idea.
the year, then I could say, you know what, September is going to be community cleanup. All right, I'm going to schedule that in now. So I'm there.
And I'd say the only problem with that is like not so much on our end, but with the community cleanup in particular, Rye is usually the one that determines the date for that. And last time, for instance, I think they told us like 2 weeks in advance of when they wanted to do it. So it was really, really last minute. And unfortunately, like that, I think that's one of the reasons why we didn't get that many people volunteering is it was just last second. But hopefully maybe if we can reach out, because there are certain events like the seed swap, the birthday, certain things that happen at almost the same time every year. So hopefully we can try to get as many dates in advance as possible and then get people to sign up. But some of them really are kind of last minute, not because we're scheduling it, but because other people are. So
I will say this though, too, in terms of like the community cleanup, as well as the town host, as well as the planting day in April. I mean, we've already started discussions, just email preliminary about when we're gonna, because we've already been asked that. And that was very frustrating for me too, because again, we just kind of put that all together like in November when it was quite cold out, that Sunday that we did it. So as long as I'm here, that is certainly not going to happen, because I have no problem telling them that either look, we have to plan this out or it's not going to happen, because that really, again, I'll just be totally honest, was really just a poor way where that was done, where we within a couple of weeks, all right, we're going to put it together on November 20th. And then, thankfully for the Roots and Shoots Club, when I was here, I mean, it was because otherwise it would have been Bridget and myself picking up all the garbage. But I just really don't blame a lot of people not wanting to come out when the wind was whipping. Again, we were quite
Yeah,
cold.
and even the communication, the flyer that they posted everywhere, it didn't have a time on it. I was like, I can't even like ask my son and his friends who go to these things if they want to come, because I was like, it doesn't say what time it is, and they make it very hard to sign up for it. So I agree, the ones that like we manage ourselves, that we can have like a clear sign up sheet and know what the time is going to be, those work.
And
Yeah,
maybe we just start planning the cleanup and like the planting days ourselves anyways, because I honestly don't think we get that many people from their advertising. I think the people that come to ours are the people that would probably come anyways. So
I have to go, you guys. I'm so sorry. Let me know if you need me to do
Okay.
anything, okay?
thank you, Stephanie. Have a good night.
Bye.
And definitely pick
No,
the dates with
maybe-
like Lana, like
So I don't
like
know
check
that
with
we
Lana
couldn't
before
like
you.
just create it on ourselves on
I was just gonna say before pick dates, like check with Lana, because she will know if there's well, there's a robotics competition, like none of the kids are going to be around or whatever it is. And because, it's basically my son and her, they're in the same friend group and they come to all these things. So like, she'll know where your core people will be if they're available or not.
Right, and
Yeah,
also the service hours that the kids can get.
Absolutely.
Really, so if they're available, they're gonna show up to these events as well.
Yeah, and I wanted to say that like the Roots and Shoots Club would like totally be interested in like helping out and like volunteering for like the butterfly garden and the community cleanups. And I'm sure if like we put around like post the flyers around the school that other people, like you said, would want community service hours too.
Great. Yeah, maybe we can plan them for warmer times of the year so we're not out there in like negative.
We can get started on now. Again, like the ones with like the community cleanup and the community planting, those are a little more difficult because again, there's the other municipalities. But the ones that we do by ourselves, like are in conjunction with, at least with just Portchester, because those are easier to plan because I'm the one, you said Portchester, but I'm not, honestly, I'm the one who does 95% of it by setting up the library and everything. So that's no problem for me, but also for like our community tag sale, we do that by ourselves. So that's something that we can plan like relatively soon, unless anybody has any dates they want to throw out there for the summer, like right now.
No, we shouldn't, because the community tax sale, the good thing about that is it doesn't take any volunteer, we
Yeah.
set it up and it takes the time more so for you, Greg, of like setting up that website, which now it's put together, hopefully.
Yeah,
And
no, it is. I have a guide. So for now, I mean, if we wanted to determine, like, or we want to stick with July, or if we did last time as well as the year before, which is totally fine for me, because now that I've done it already, I have a guide to go by. So it's that's not going to be a problem in terms of getting everything done. I mean, the one thing that was frustrating, and there's nothing to do with any of you guys, it was that I was just putting together the list and it would say, oh, at the deadline, can I put myself in, or can I want to pull out for whatever reason because it was too hot out. And some people calling me saying that, oh, are we going to be postponed because of weather? And my answer was no. I mean, the date's been that way for the last couple of months. I mean, I'm sorry that it's hot out, but again, we can't control Mother Nature. I mean,
yeah, and it's the hard, yeah.
Again, that's nothing we can control. Like if the weather sucks, in terms of that it's hot out, I mean, there's certain things, just to be honest, you either you're going to do it or you're not. I mean, if it's raining, it's different. If it's raining, again, I wouldn't expect people to come out and try to get furniture when it's a monsoon out. But again, if it's too hot out, we can't control that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And remember with that day, the goal was people were just kind of just throwing, just because, pickup is every week, people were just throwing away stuff that's perfectly good. So by having an option for the community to say, hold those things right now for this day where you can sell it, and whether you donate it or sell it, gives them an option not to just throw things on the curb every week. So that was the goal. Whether somebody says it's too hot, I'm not going to, take part of it. That's just a different story there.
Yeah, and you can get rid of everything, the items by bulk. You can make a little bit of cash, or you can donate it if that's what you want to do.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But
I know.
you're not putting out for bulk, and they're not going to take all those items at once. So it's an opportunity for you to kind of part with items that you don't, for whatever reason, you don't want anymore.
Mhm. Yeah, it seemed to be a big success. And I feel like no matter what date we choose, there's always some people like, no, I don't like that. Do it then, do it another date. So we kind of we, of course, the worst thing to happen is a lot of rain, because then we have to delay it to the week after, which luckily that hasn't happened yet. But then I have people saying, oh, we don't want it when it's so hot, but I'm like, then you risk having the rain. So it's, we just have to, I feel like we should just try to stick with around the time that we always do it so that people can know to expect it, because this will be the 3rd year that we've done it. So if we continue on with having it at around the same time, then it doesn't confuse people where it's like, oh, well, we had it in August last time, now we're going to have it in, it's like, we don't want to switch things up too much, I don't think. And summer is hot, like it's just going to be hot and that's better than it raining. So, we'll just
last summer was unusually hot where we didn't get any rain. And then I'll be honest, I was kind of mad because we put that work into revitalizing that butterfly garden out the front, and that kind of destroyed everything we did. So that's another event. So considering that the sun annihilated all the plants outside, That's something else that again, we'll have to, again, hopefully revitalize. I mean, that one. I mean, that money will come out of the sustainability budget that we have. We're always budgeted for $1,000 per fiscal year. I mean, the butterfly garden for Rye Hills, that's going to be funded by donations because that's going to be too much of a costly endeavor for us or any other funds that we have to allocate to that. But and we did that one, I think, late May, if I remember correctly. So yeah, I mean, I don't mind doing it around that time again either. But yeah, just trying to get this now. So I understand that our schedules build up. Same thing with me, but. I just also want to throw this out there. Other than the stuff we did last year, because it was also I've only been here years, or any other events that anybody would like to maybe consider doing.
The butterfly garden sounds interesting, but I mean, I don't know what weekend it's going to be in May, but I can make myself available.
Okay, that sounds good. Again, and that one we had the volunteers from Roots and Shoots, a couple other like a smattering of volunteers in the community. Bridget, myself, and her husband came. And that one, with the help of our highway staff, we would have done like in a couple hours. So yeah, that's something that's nice and simple for nothing that's like totally backbreaking for community service hours and for you guys if you just want to get involved as well. It's a nice simple way to get your feet wet. But one thing actually I almost forgot. I didn't want to forget this, like the birthday. I know we were having conversation last year about this, but we unfortunately, because I couldn't get a commitment from at least 2 members to come, we weren't able to have a table. And I'll be honest, that kind of sucked because getting a table at an event like the birthday, that's a perfect opportunity to not only promote the committee, but also to promote the activities that we do and to promote like the legislation about leaf blowers. That's a good, perfect opportunity to educate the public, perfect opportunity to teach them alternative ways that they don't have to use a leaf blower, like mulching, for example. Again, so these are the events that, and it's always in the birthday. I mean, that's something that we can commit to. I don't remember the exact date, but what I've been told, it's always the same weekend in June.
It's always the Saturday before Father's Day.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's something that, why don't we try to get some commitment relatively soon? That's how we can have a table and then we can promote whatever it is. Because at that point, hopefully, the leaf blower legislation has long been passed. I mean, it doesn't have to be just that, but I'm just to give you guys an idea. But these are golden opportunities when you have pretty much half the population of Rye Brook in one spot. That you can promote yourselves and promote what we do.
We sold the compost bins also.
Yeah, we can do that as well.
As long as you're there.
Yeah, which I will be because I'm
sell
going
the bins.
Again, unless I'm sick or something happens to me, which I'm hopefully that doesn't happen. But I plan on being at those events.
Yeah, I think, Greg, the thing about the compost bins is we need someone from the village to handle the money, right?
Yeah,
I think that was the rule there on that.
And that's fine. I can do that as well, along with you guys.
But the birthday is a good opportunity to have literature for the residents about the leaf blowing.
And what about the food truck one for composting too? That's a separate one, right? So
what?
The food truck event where they have the
last year we had the first time we did it was before COVID. It was in 2019, right before COVID. So we just had food trucks, but last year they decided to have games and activities as well, because one of the complaints that we got about it is that there wasn't really a big draw to keep people there. I mean, the food trucks are nice, but then people would get the food and they would leave. So again, they had some games and activities to make people stay there. So that's also potential another opportunity that I can bring to our community support group, which I'm a part of, that where we discuss these different village events. To say, maybe we can have a table there. And just going back to the birthday real quickly, the airport advisory committee, they were very successful with the table that they had, promoting the different events that they do. They actually had they had toy airplanes, because toy airplanes brings the kids, and the kids will bring their parents, and they can teach them about, talk to parents that come about what the airport committee does, and particularly about, for example, the issue with the airport master plan that's been going on, etc.
Sorry to interrupt. I have to leave now.
Sounds good. Thank you for coming. Lana.
Bye, have a good night.
Thank you,
Maybe
Lana.
we can, continue this also like via email, like I can send out a list of events and then we could try to decide, you know, the ones that we don't have dates, we can see what would work for the most people in the email. We can kind of go back and forth or have people vote on like which one they want to do. for,
I'd
like-
also like to get the tag sale date.
Mhm.
That's something we can get, you can narrow down easily too, because that involves nobody else except us.
Exactly.
Last year we had it on July 17th, which was a Saturday. The rain date was the Saturday afterwards. So I can send out via email. It looks like be like the 18th and the 22nd, or we could do like the 8th and the 15th or something. That all again, that's one of those ones that at least we don't have to be there per se, unless we want to participate with our own tag sales. We don't have to like go around and monitor people's tag sales. Everybody sort of does it on their own. It's just the advertising beforehand. So
Great. The advertising also, I know we've been collecting boxes of stuff in the garage all year. And I know other people have said, oh, if I had only known ... So I'm hoping this year we can advertise it a little sooner so people will save some of that stuff instead of putting out in bulk, which was the original idea.
yeah, and I think we send out a save the date kind of as soon as we know that we have a date set, and then we can send out, you know, every month more information, and then eventually the link where people can sign up, hopefully like a month in advance or so. That way people aren't doing it like last second. And I know especially some of the nonprofits and some of the different schools and houses of worship and stuff, they want to participate too. So that gives them a chance to like participate as well if they have enough advance notice. So yeah, I think as soon as we kind of decide, we can advertise it.
And
I was amazed at how popular it was actually last year. I had never done anything like that before, and there were people coming way before the starting time.
Oh, yeah, well, once people hear about that, I feel like once people know that we do it, people will come from all over to come and shop at like such a big tag sale, you know, event. So yeah, there are people from like other states that were coming and everything, but I feel like if we do it at the same time every year and people can know that, hey, this is a huge event, because I know a lot of people said they like weren't sure, they didn't know if they were going to participate, but then they saw their neighbors put out stuff, then they decided, okay, I'm going to put out stuff even though I'm not on the map, I'm going to still put out things because I see all these people coming. And so then they started selling things and the other neighbors started selling things. So it just gets bigger and bigger each year that we do it. So hopefully eventually it will be like a really huge event that shows that you can like upcycle and, you know, not have to put things out in the big item pickup or in the, you know, every Friday in the bulk pickup.
And then you told us where to go after we went right to Green Drop and dropped off what we didn't sell.
Yeah. So, because I do think a lot of that stuff does otherwise, like we mentioned, ends up in the trash, which is not where it should go because it is usable items. But unfortunately, it is very convenient to do that when you have people picking it up every Friday from the front of your door, you know, so. But maybe we can, I don't know if we have the option to do, like I've seen people do like the doodle polls where you can like put in different dates and people can vote. So maybe we can do something like that with some of these events that we have, just to see like the numbers of like, hey, 4 people like this date, you know, and 2 people like this date. So we can kind of determine with some of these ones that don't have set dates yet, which days you want to do it on. I'm writing down a list, and so I can try to put something together like that, maybe with Greg, to send out to everybody so that we can vote and then get some dates set and hopefully get some people to volunteer as well for the ones that need volunteers.
Yeah, and that's what, but Bridget, I just have one question. Would you think F10 would allow to people to be back again like last year?
Oh yeah, definitely, because they actually got like, they made a lot of money. It was much better this time, and they got some really big donors that donated as well that found them through coming to the event. So it was nice.
That is so great.
Yeah.
It was really fun there. It was really lovely. And I was a terrible salesperson. When a cute kid would come over, we would just give it to them. My husband said, "You don't have to pay." But we donated what we made to the organization, and it was a nice thing.
Perfect. But again, my next community support meeting is actually is on February 22nd. So again, make us enough time, at least now and then, just to get some, like, at least just some tentative dates out there, because I can bring these dates to the committee just to throw it at them. So that way, again, but with like the community tag sale, and we don't want that in competition with another event that the village may be doing. So that way, again, we're not competing with each other. So that's why, again, part of the motivation is also kind of get the dates that work best for you guys. So that way I can kind of tell them, look, these are the dates that we want. Because it's like asking me, let's stay like for the food truck event, then we can stay away from the day that it's going to be like for our tag sale.
Right. I mean, ideally for such event like this, we should almost say, hopefully it's the third Saturday in July. Then, Rye Brook will always know, okay, that's the community tag sale, third Saturday in July or whatever, instead of every year trying to figure out, okay, should we do it January 1st till July 1st or August 1st or something?
Right.
If we can kind of peg something,
And I don't see any reason why we can't. And it's something that, look, because again, I've only been here a year, but it's one of the things that we have on the list that's an expectation.
Okay, so do we have a consensus on if we would want it to be the second, or the only thing we have to consider is that we usually do a rain date of the afterwards. So would we want to just say off the top of our heads, Debbie, it looks like you were raising your hand.
Oh, she's leaving.
She was leaving.
Who's leaving?
Okay.
She was waving.
So do we want to, I know before it seems like we had done it the second, the third Saturday, with the fourth Saturday being the rain date. Do we want to stick to that? So have it be the 15th with the rain date being the 22nd? Do we want to just say, does that sound okay to
I think
everyone?
it would be easier to stick to that. Yes.
Yeah.
Third
Yeah, and we
fourth.
don't want it like the first, because you want to stay away from the 4th of July.
Yeah.
So weekend that falls on and things like that. So by being the third, we're clear of the 4th of July. We're in the middle of summer, and then
Right.
third and fourth rain date, and then we know that every year that's the date.
Then it's set in stone forever that we will every July. Okay, perfect. So I think as long as, like Greg said, that doesn't interfere with anything. And who knows, maybe having the food truck event the same day would actually be a good thing, because people are hungry and want to get food. I know there are people actually selling like refreshments and things. So,
Yeah, but now
That's what I thought.
because again, we've kind of changed it around, and rightfully so, so how people stay at the food truck event. And after you have kids running around and eating food, I mean, I'm just being honest, I doubt a lot of people, particularly the parents, are going to want to drive around now to all these different addresses once everyone's like running around in the hot summer day. I mean, I personally wouldn't mind, but I'm just trying to be realistic.
Yeah, we'll let the kids with the lemonade stands make the money. I know that they're out there making their funds from the state. So we'll let them keep that. So I guess unless you find some sort of something that won't work with those days, then you'll let us know. Otherwise, we can just plan on doing it the third Saturday with the 4th as the rain date.
Yep. That's
Okay, perfect.
totally
And then we
fine.
can send out emails for the rest of the events ahead of
Yeah.
time. So hopefully we can plan as much as possible.
Yeah, I just want to get this conversation started now. So during, again, our next meeting in March, we'll also continue talking about it. But again, I just wanted to get the conversation started. So again, at least we get the ball rolling, so we don't run into some of the same problems that we had last year. And again, like this, the birthday, I mean, the birthday, we know it's always the same, provided that it rains. I mean, although they've done it when it's raining, but again, if it monsoons, I don't, that's only probably the exception where they won't do it. But the birthday, that's the day now we have in advance. That's the day that we can start asking for volunteers.
Great. It's 9:17 now, so I don't want to hold everybody forever, but is there anything else that we wanted to add to the discussion, or?
Bridget, how do you want to, I mean, we could I don't know if we're allowed to stay on this Zoom since it's the meeting, but
We can, yeah, no, once I stop the recording, then I'll
Okay.
stay on with, Bridget, Ashley and myself, but just before we do that, again, just in closing remarks for the rest of you, and, if the public will be watching this later, at your own conveniences. That's again, just keep us, please, again, just for at least for the 28th. Again, we'll take a look at whatever is drafted by Ashley and Bridget. But just keep in mind, please try to show up for the 28th. And again, you who bring just one person along with you, again, that's a success in itself. As well as I'll communicate again with Lionelette, but with the Roots and Shoes Club, maybe they want to come and talk about it as the student or the youth representatives of Rye Brook. But but before it all, I just want to thank all of you guys for sticking with this for the last year, at least that I've been here. I know you guys have been talking about it long before I came to the village, and that this has been at times a very time-consuming, exhausting, and to be honest, kind of tedious process. But I am more confident than ever that there is a finish line that's visible to all of us. But I definitely appreciate all the effort that everyone has put in to make this a reality. And we may be one of the last communities to do this, but I personally feel, and I have no problem saying this, that we've done it probably the best way, or one of the best ways out of most communities, considering that a lot of the outreach that we've done, I know meetings I've had with Bridget, with landscapers, and reaching out to the different stakeholders that are involved, because the way I see it is that it may have taken us longer, but we're trying to do it the right way. So that way we can avoid a lot of the problems that we have discussed tonight, as well as prior meetings. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be no matter a smooth sailing process, no matter what, because as Ashley said, change is always a little bit difficult. And there's going to be some pushback no matter what we do. So yeah, there's never going to be a perfect solution really for anything. But I do think that we've tried to cover every angle possible that is humanly possible. So we'll see what happens come the 28th, and it's going to be a long night. So for those of you who come, I just want to let you know we're going to be in it for a long haul that night. It's going to be a while, but again, this is honestly the day that counts the most. So all the hard work that we put in has led up to the 28th, and maybe the next meeting after that. So it's led up to the next couple dates. But again, we are almost there. So again, unless anybody has anything else they want to address, then I will stop and allow the rest, except Bridget and Ashley, to sign off. And then I will stay on with you two just to discuss some more about the follow-up.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Night.